so that I don't get interrupted by you guys, and at the end I'll do questions and we can go from there, alright? Yeah, I'm going to. So it is now streaming. Are you able to see and or hear it? Here's the link. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself in Discord so that I can focus. Alright, so we're going to be going over how to make something in Fusion here. So my homie wants to take one of these mixer boards and angle it on his desk. Potentially different angles. So I'm going to model something that has an adjustable setup. And I'm going to walk you through how I'm doing this so that you can do it yourself. So first of all, I imported this canvas, and I'm going to walk you through this. Basically, in Fusion, everything is set up with drawings, and then making those drawings have depth. And when you're working with something as a reference, you know, once you get to the point where you know what you're doing, you can just measure with your calipers and just directly input numbers. But especially when you're getting started, or if you're using a complex shape, you want to take a picture of it as flat of an angle as you can. But, you know, with like measurement references. So what you do is once you have that picture, and I'll typically take a picture like with a ruler or tape measure or calipers or whatever. You're going to insert canvas. Then you find the image you want to work with. And then you pick which face you're going to place it on. Now I'm holding shift and middle mouse to be able to navigate in 3 dimensions here to, you know, look at my shenanigans. That can get disorienting real fast, so you've got this little cubey boy up in the top. You can just pick a side that you want to look at. I want it on this face, and it's going to be the wrong scale. So we know that this top piece is about 40.5 centimeters. So I'm going to just to get myself some scale reference, I'm going to make a... That's not right. That is 40.5 centimeters. So now what I need to do, and just to explain what I did there, let me do it again. I did it way too fast. Create a sketch. I want to pick the same plane that I'm working with on the thing. I'm going to go to the line tool, or hit the L key as in Ligma, and I'm going to do a 40.5 centimeter line, or 405 millimeters. I'm going to go back to this canvas, and right-click it, and go to Edit. And so this middle dragger will size things both vertically and horizontally, which is what you want. I'm also going to rotate it so that we are at about the right angle. Now, this isn't something super precision, so I'm kind of like hammer nail this rather than scalpeling it. But that's close enough. That's about 40 and that's about lined up. So we now have an idea of that's about true to life size of what we're working with here. So I can hide all these lines because I have my canvas scaled. So the design I'm going to do is I'm literally going to make a little notch claspy thing that we'll be able to move forward and backwards to adjust the angle that this thing's sitting at. So imagining that this down here is the desk, this here is the back of his desk, we're going to go with that as a premise. And we're going to start straight up and down because that's just going to be the most extreme angle it could possibly be at. And that'll make this easiest. So I want to finish the sketch because I want a fresh sketch. Everything in Fusion is sketch-based. You start with these, non-3D angles and you turn them into something 3D. So I've rotated to the angle that I want to. I've started a new sketch. I'm going to draw a line. And I see your comments there in Discord. All right. So I have 2 lines that I have made that this could theoretically be held against when this thing is rotating, right? And just to give myself an idea, of the extreme angles. And again, this is not the best way to do any of this. This is just how I know how to do it. I just need something that's going to hold this from sliding, right? So I'm very simply going to make these 2 lines with the, line tool. I'm hitting L. And that can about hold that. I'm going to make this one a little taller, just so that it has a good grasp on there. Now, there's 2 different ways to give this some more size. You can either manually draw out all the lines or use this offset tool to give yourself, like, this kind of deal. I'm going to just manually draw it for ease of use. So this is about 10 pounds. 6 millimeters should be more than enough to deal with that. And the bottom piece isn't going to be taking all that much, plus I'm going to have a second bottom piece that I'm going to design. However, it is going to have little notches in the bottom so that we can adjust the size. So let's make this 4, let's make it 6, just to keep things consistent. And one of the nice things about Fusion is you can drag your mouse over stuff, and it'll make these dotted lines so that you can kind of get an idea of what you're referencing and how that's all working. But, so I've made a shape. I now have an L. This is not a printable L because it does not have any depth. But I'm going to work on that now. So, what you do at this point, now that you have kind of the shape that you want, let's make it 3D. I'm going to finish the sketch. I'm going to hit extrude. Now this is also the E key on your keyboard. And you can just drag it to whatever thickness you want. This doesn't need to be huge. I'm just going to make this 20 millimeters because at the end of the day, all it's doing is acting as kind of like a little shelf wedgie boy to keep the thing from sliding forward. So 20 millimeters is fine. Then I'm going to hit enter. I now have a printable L shape, but that's not quite good enough because I want to create basically a track for this to slide on, right? So I don't really need the canvas at this point. So I'm going to hide that. And I'm going to create a new sketch. Now, this time, because I want to reference this part, I'm going to click this surface. I'm going to make a square that is the exact same... rectangle, rather. That's the exact same size as this boy. And I want to give it some tangible distance. So I've made the rectangle. Now, this is where all these different references are great to be able to hide and show and do all of that noise. So I'm going to extrude this. And this doesn't need to be thick. This can be 2 millimeters and be flawless, right? So we now have a second object, or body as it's called in Fusion. Now, if I unhide the first body, you'll see that they match right up. Had I not hidden that first body, I'm going to do this again. If I just try to extrude this, it's going to want to join it and just add to the original body. I don't want that. I want a new body. And that's my cat in the background being adorable. I assume you can hear that. So I now have 2 objects. Now, I want to create a track for this guy to, or rather some kind of locking piece. Now, there's like 1,000 ways you can do this. You do it manually. I don't recommend that. I'm going to do it like this. Well, let's get a center line so that I have a good reference point. I'm going to do a new sketch because now I want to reference this face. I'm using my line tool, and if you mouse down, you'll see this triangle. That means you're at the center of that line. And let's go in... How long is this? 46. Let's go in 5. So there's no real importance in how I'm designing this at this point. These are just going to be little pegs that are going to have other pegs to sit into. So I've made myself a little rectangle that's 2 by 2 by 4, if my measurements are correct. And now I'm make this into a pattern. See if I remember how to do this. So I'm going to go to create rectangular pattern. Let's see if I remember how to do this. I don't. Let me get rid of the rest of this sketch. Don't want it there. I just want this. I just want this piece. So I've selected the objects. I'm going to do this. I want them to be evenly spaced, so that's automatically going to do that for me. I want there to be a reasonable number of them. Because the more of these there are, that's basically more points for the adjustment to be made at. So I've arbitrarily picked 10 of them, and I'm going to go like that. Now I'm going to reshape, I'm going to finish my sketch here. I'm going to shrink this boy down to kind of reach the edges of those measurement lines. Because that's all we're going to be working with here. So at this point we have a bunch of rectangles, and this is what our top piece is going to look like, right? So actually I didn't need to cut the width of that down because I'm going to have those extrude upwards, but whatever, here we are. So at this point I'm going to do two things. I am going to first realize that what I should have done is done this step before, but whatever. I'm going to edit the sketch. I'm going to offset all of these. You know what? Let me redo this properly. I'm going to create an offset of this. And this is so clearance, right? So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making pegs out of these. And if I make this a 2x4 rectangle and I make the hole a 2x4 rectangle, it's not going to fit. The fitament's going to be way too close because printers aren't 100% accurate. So I'm going to give it a good 0.6 millimeters of overage on the top as a kind of clearance deal. I'm going to do the same thing. 10. No. Why do you do this to me? See, this is what it looks like when you're bad at Fusion. Alright, so we've got these little rectangles here, and they're facing our body. What I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude upwards. Hide that body. I'm going to extrude all of these upwards. What that's going to do is that's going to cut into this body, right? So we're going to just do that 2 millimeters. Let's call it 2.5, just to give myself some, again, some clearance. You always want to oversize things when you're talking about two parts that are going to interact with one another. Now, the problem I'm seeing is if the notches don't fit perfectly, like let's say I use 10 notches on the bottom, right? What would happen is if he tries to put it past here or past here, it won't fit up right. But I'm not redesigning it, so it is what it is. So now we have notches cut in this. Now we have our bottom piece. Now in Fusion, anytime you extrude a sketch, it automatically hides it because it's assuming you're done with it. So get used to being annoyed by that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just make 2 of these extruded. So the idea is that we want to be able to bring this to almost a vertical. So this bottom piece is going to be double face taped to his desk. And I'm going to make it so that the notches are in the front, because at the end of the day, this should be as hidden as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude these 2. Right? So then the idea would be, this top piece, it can stick into that as he adjusts what angle he wants the thing to be at. So very simply, see, this is where you want to use this cube, because it can get really, really janky when you're just wiggling this around and your perspective can get all confused. The cube is your friend. Alright, so I'm going to bring those up 2, not 2.5, because again, I want that clearance in there. Now, something I always do is I always add as much curve as I can to certain things. Specifically, things that are going to take like horizontal force, like this. It just makes the edge adherence a little bit better, but that's my own personal thing. So at this point, we kind of have a no curve example of what I want this design to be, right? So the device is going to sit here, and this is going to be the little track that he can double face tape onto his desk and slide around. Now, I'm going to do some finishing steps on this so that we have a nicer product. I'm going to drop this 4, 5, yeah, because this doesn't need to be big. And this front piece doesn't even need to be there at all. And this top piece, well, now that I'm thinking about it, if it's not perfectly centered, that might wobble around from side to side. So you know what? I'm going to leave it like that. Alright, so now at this point, we want this, we want to do our finishing steps. Now, I always do curves and other non-hard lines at the very end, because as soon as you start adding non-measurable lines, like, well, they're not that they're not measurable, but complex surfaces like curves and such, it makes your whole model worlds harder to work with. So I always do that last. Now you have your timeline down here, so you can always go back and undo them, but it gets unruly quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm now realizing that this probably isn't super long to do, you know, big adjustments. If I were doing this as more of a long-term thing, I'd probably draw this line out maybe another, like, 4 or 5 times. But this is just an example, so it's fine. I'm going to use the fillet tool. So that's your F key, or you can click up here. What that's going to do is that's going to curve things for me. So you see how this is a hard edge? I don't want that to be a hard edge because one, structurally that's not the best, and two, it looks dumb. So I'm going to hit F, I'm going to click that edge, and I can drag it here to make this filleted. Now, you can also use a similar tool, chamfer, to give it exactly what looks in this picture, a flat edge instead of a curved one. But let's compare. Now again, this doesn't have to be surgery accurate, so I'm going to leave it like that. So it looks about right. I'm going to drop it just a little bit because, clearance. So at this point we have a little curved thing, so that's going to look a little nicer. Now, also, I want something up here to keep it from just running away. So, what I'm going to do... Nah, that looks about right. This is just a wedge that's going to be stuck to the desk, so this should keep it from running away on us. So at this point, we have what is effectively a functional printable object, right? But it looks dumb. I don't want it to look dumb. So I'm going to do a few more changes here. So we have, this is going to be what is showing the desk, or facing forward, I should say. So I want this to look, less boring. So let's put some words on here. I'm going to create a sketch. I'm going to click this surface. Rotate myself so that I'm straight up and down like it will be on the desk. I go to text. So everything in Fusion will want to snap to these squares. You can turn that off right here with the snapping tool. Or you can do it the worst way and just scroll in real good. But I'm going to make text here. I'm just going to arbitrarily picking numbers. Alright, so 3.4 looks about right. Let's center it all up. Let's make it the world's best font. So that changes my size a little bit. Alright, so what I did was I went to create and I got the text tool and I dragged that into this sketch. Now, when I extrude, I can negative extrude this. I'm going to finish the sketch. And when this prints, it'll have text on it. Now, negative 2 millimeters of cutout is kind of what you want to go for a lot of text. Anything less than that, it can start to just look like it's embossed rather than actually cut out. For example, I made some wine glass holders and I put my initials on it and I used 1 millimeter and it literally, it looked cool. It looked like there was just a little bit of somebody took a stamp and gently pressed in there. But that's not what I want here. I want cool stand for cool kids to be incredibly visible here. Now I'm going to round off all of the edges because I just think rounded edges look a billion times nicer. But you don't have to do that on your stuff. Now, because of that curve, it might actually get angry at me. Because that's just how Fusion likes to act. But we're going to find out as soon as I add fillet. Nope, it's fine. So it's 1 millimeter, or 1 unit of fillet, whatever that measurement is. I'm not worried about these back edges. They're not part of the thing. Now, when this prints, something that you want to keep in mind, if I were to want to print it on this face, I might not want to curve these edges because it's going to encourage it to warp off the build plate if it doesn't have a hard edge that's attached. I've observed that many times. I plan to print this. Never, because it's not for me. But if I were going to, I'd print it using either this face. Nah, that's about how I would do it. So I would use that face. So let's curve this boy so that they match all pretty. Alright. Alright, so we at this point have our stand, and it's 2 pieces. So we now have our 3D object. I'm going to show you how to export it. We're going to go to Tools and to Make. Now, I'm going to export them one at a time. And keep in mind, you got to uncheck this Send to 3D Print utility. When I was first learning how to do this, I was stuck on this for an ungodly amount of time. Because like, why can't I export it? Just got to uncheck that Send to 3D Print utility. You hit OK. Stand part 1. I'm going to go to Make again. This time I'm going to click the other body. Stand part 2. Open Cura. Wait for it to load. Open things that I just modeled. And wham bam, we now have created our 3D boy. Now, there's nothing super fancy that has to happen with this specific design in order to print it. I might add more tabs if I was going to print this for a 10-pound object. But typically these work pretty well. One thing I forgot was I like to add curves to any connected surfaces that are going to take any kind of force. It just helps them survive a little longer. So because the force is going to be front back like this, and it doesn't need to be a lot, I might add like just that much. But that much plastic is just going to make it that much more durable to shenanigans. But you obviously going to make sure that you don't interact with the holes that you cut, or rather get in the way of them. And there's a way to make these transparent so that you can actually see how they interact. Appearance. I forget how to do this. Aha! Opacity control. So I can kind of see where those shapes are going to interact if they have space. So, like, they're close, but they should be fine. So I can go back to opacity control and just put that back to a solid object. And that's really important when you're working with complex stuff that has interlocking parts and such. But yeah, at this point, you just print the thing, and you're done. And that's how to poorly model things